So hello and welcome to all to Plateau Plateau 2, part 5 of our podcast. And very briefly, I'm just going to say that we will still be dealing with Immanuel Kant and the unhinging of time. And we are going to get into a séance or a lesson that Gilles Deleuze did in 1983 at Vincent, the University of Vincent on Paris, in Paris in 1983 on Immanuel Kant. We'll get a little bit into the dialogues with Gilles Deleuze and Claire Parnet, and therefore what is really important here is the force of the concept. So a true philosopher, a great philosopher, creates a concept. And if he creates a concept, according to Gilles Deleuze, it's not up to you to interpret that concept. That concept must cut through you like a chainsaw, literally, with affects and percepts. That means on the in the sensible world, affects; in the transcendental world, percepts. So a concept will cut through you. It's not like it's a neutral thing where, there's a concept and then therefore I have to interpret it. No, a true concept made by a great philosopher will cut through you like a knife. It will shoot arrows through you, through your soul and through your body. And that is why in this particular chapter, in Spinozian terms, the concept can increase your power of existence, and that is something hopefully we'll get into later, but your power of existence. So for Spinoza, certain beings have lesser and greater powers of existence. For Spinoza, Christ himself was the person, quite logically, who increased his powers of existence towards the infinite, and he was the only one up until now, and then he merged with God, or God and nature, and just completely became one with the infinity of the universe or cosmos, etc., etc. So we who are not as great as Jesus Christ, we still have the capacity to increase our power of existence through concepts which affect us, cut through us, and they change our means of perception, and they change at the same time our bodies. Very important point. And that is why we will get in this part or chapter into a little bit about affections, and more specifically viruses, and more specifically viruses in South America, in the conquest by the Spanish, who brought influenza, the flu, to the Native Americans whose bodies had never encountered this kind of virus or affect we could kind of say concept were a little bit risky, but however, the Spanish, much more Native Americans in South America died from the affect of the virus of the flu than actually through, killing and warfare and et cetera, et cetera. So from there, we will jump very quickly into COVID and how COVID potentially may have affected our bodies in we don't really know in certain ways, and from there we will go on to a-paralel evolution, and this is Deleuze and Guattari, who are essentially saying that Darwinian linear evolution, that's okay, that's good, we just descend and we adapt from generation to generation, but Deleuze and Guattari essentially said that this linear evolution is heavily affected by viruses, and that's always the way it's been since the beginning of time. So we are not just simply evolving in a linear way as human beings, adapting to our environments as time goes on. We are being affected in our evolution by a whole series of viruses, the bubonic plague, the black plague, the Spanish flu, influenza, COVID, and those, Guattari would say, those molecular infections on linear evolution have to be considered in the terms of evolution. So the whole point here is to get into Kant and time and the power of his criticism of René Descartes and this doubling of the self through the unhinging of time, meaning we have two selves. We have a transcendental I and an empirical I, which are, so therefore the I, the me, in difference to Descartes, is differential and they auto-affect one another. And then 300 years later, when we get into Freud and Lacan, we will see how Kant is so fundamental, and we will understand why his concepts, weren't just there for interpretation. They cut through philosophy, through people, and therefore later you'll get Freud with the ego, superego, and Lacan. So we have this concept of we all have two eyes, and then that is the differential self. So those are essentially the contents of this chapter, and I hope you enjoy it. For people very passionate about this, I think it should be very interesting. And as always, thank you to all those few brave people that follow us. So enjoy and see you next time. Okay, so I'm hidden here between all the windows, and we're going to move along, and we're going to go to the next part of this this course that Gilles Deleuze gave at Vincent in 1983, keeping in mind that Deleuze, as we saw before, said it took him 30 years before he was able to speak to his students about Kant. So it took him 30 years to get to the point where he was capable of expressing the concept of Kant, and that is no small thing. So we're going to go on, and I think this is a really, really important chapter. We're not going to touch directly on time yet. We will get to that, but I think there's such valuable information in this, this lesson by Deleuze to his students that it's really worthwhile to take a step back and look at it, because he's going to talk specifically about the concept. And we know on this podcast we've looked into a little bit into the concept and what is philosophy and the conceptual personae, and hopefully those are things that, and then we looked into aeon and chronos in kind of a superficial way, so we understand chronological time and non-chronological time, and becoming, obviously, and therefore I think this is really, really valuable. What we're going to do is we're going to put Immanuel Kant into retirement. We don't want to be too repetitive with him, so he did his job. He's old and tired, and he's going to take a rest. And what we have now is a bizarre AI-generated image of Friedrich Nietzsche, who's going to read us the next chapter, the next part of Deleuze's lesson. And ironically, I just want to state that when I was trying to make these, I got all kinds of copyright violations. So, and then I said, Hal, in order to avoid it, I'm just gonna, try and make some artificial intelligence generated images of Nietzsche, and this dude popped up here, who looks kind of like I'm not sure, like 1970s bro in Las Vegas or whatever. However, I think it's more than sufficient. So it's up to Freddie is going to read this next part to us, and let me cut this audio off so we have no echo, and let's go ahead.
But, in my opinion, the concepts have never been separable from two other things, and these two other things must be called, if only for the harmony of comparison, they must be called effects and percepts. And a concept is zero, but zero, if it does not change the nature of your effects, first, and second, if it does not bring you new percepts. What does that mean? We will have the opportunity to see him again. Feel that it is very Nietzschean, there. So a concept, let's say, is something intelligible, its intelligibility. I say, every concept must be referred to an effect, and to every concept, we must ask, what new effects do you bring to me? But, it would be nothing like that again, and you will see. It is necessary, only it does not say, you have a concept, well, it does not say, the new effects it brings, it is up to you. Concepts, they are of different kinds, they can be scientific, they can be philosophical. Well, I'm not getting into the question, what a difference there is, let's say, but anyway, even when it's concepts, scientists, until we know what it changes in our effects, we have not yet understood the meaning of the concept.
Okay, so I'm coming back with the audio right here. Thank you very much, Friedrich. Very well done, and I'm just going to run through this text because I do think it is very, very important in understanding the notion of the concept by Gilles Deleuze. So we have, but in my opinion, the concepts have never been separable from two other things, and these two other things must be called, if only for the harmony of comparison, they must be called affects and percepts. And the concept is zero, but zero, that's 4 zeros, if it does not change the nature of your affects, first and second, if it does not bring you new percepts. So Deleuze here is saying that a concept created by philosophers has absolutely zero value if you do not enter into a becoming with that concept, and that concept should, if you truly enter into becoming with it, it will change your affects. It will change your ability to be affected. It will change your ability to affect other things, other people, and it will change your perception. So without affects and percepts, Gilles Deleuze says the concept is absolutely worth 0 4 times. What does that mean? We will have the opportunity to see him again. Feel that it is very Nietzschean there, so that's why we dragged Fred into the situation. This is something that becomes is very, very close to Nietzsche and affects and percepts and the concept. The concept must affect your life as a living being. It must change your perception and your affections. Otherwise, a concept is just a dead, intelligible thing, and your intelligibility will be satisfied, and you'll say, "Wow, I understood the concept. That's great." But if it doesn't change you in any way, then the concept is worth absolutely nothing. So a concept, let's say it's something intelligible, it's intelligibility. I say every concept, I repeat again, Deleuze is very forceful here. I say every concept must be referred to an affect. And to every concept, we must ask, what new affects do you bring to me? But it will be nothing like that again, and you will see it. It is necessary. Only it does not say you have a concept. Well, it does not say the new affects it brings. It is up to you. So once again, once you enter into a becoming with a truly philosophical concept, it is up to you, to your pre-philosophical orientations, presuppositions. It's up to your conceptual persona to enter into becoming with a concept. And the concept, once you enter into becoming, it's up to you to decide how that affects you and how it changes your perception, or obviously how you might be critical also of the concept. But the important thing is that if you're not affected directly by concept, then the concept in itself for you is just a dead thing. Concepts, they are of different kinds. They can be scientific, they can be philosophical. Well, I'm not getting into the question what a difference there is, let's say. And that means that for Deleuze, and this is 1983, so in 1992, What is Philosophy will be published. Deleuze is already saying philosophical concepts and scientific concepts are radically different. However, in the course he's giving to his students on Kant, Immanuel Kant, he's not going to get in to that distinction. But anyway, even when it's concepts, scientists, until we know what changes in our affects, we have not understood the meaning of the concept. So once again, if you have a concept and you do not understand how that concept affects you as, let's say, an individual, you'll never understand even the meaning of what a concept is, because for Deleuze, the essential meaning or role of a concept is that people, and I think even in our last podcast, when we talked about Greece, we are all friends of the concept. So we become friends amongst ourselves on a social level. Through the concept, we never obtain the concept because it's unobtainable, but we are philosophia, we are friends of wisdom, and therefore when we engage together in a concept, or when we share, we're talking two or more people, we share an interest, an affinity with the concept, therefore we have friendship amongst ourselves. So Deleuze is saying essentially that the concept is shared. It's social. It's kind of the base of society itself, and that's why I wanted to stress a little bit on this piece. And let's see from here how to move on. Okay, see, we are going to keep moving along a little bit of this on this line until we get directly into the issue of time in this seance by Gilles Deleuze in 1983. And we're just going to go ahead with the earlier parts, and then we'll skip some repetitive parts because I think we're kind of getting the sense here on Deleuze and the concept, and specifically the fact that for Deleuze, Gilles Deleuze, a concept cannot even exist without affects and percepts, and affects and percepts are something which do indeed compose the concept itself. However, they extend beyond the concept, specifically into a becoming with someone who is referring back to that concept. So right now, our new presenter, we're getting full German here, correctly so, because this is stuff from the German Romantic period. We have an AI created Heinrich von Kleist. So thank you very much, Heinrich. This is an AI interpretation of him to avoid copyright issues, and I think he looks pretty good, pretty handsome, a little bit unhinged, and let's be honest, he was a little bit unhinged, and that's not a bad thing. And he's going to read us the next part of the seance by Gilles Deleuze. And just keep in mind, when I'm just going to read the first line in the original French. In the original French, we have, this is Gilles Deleuze, je dirais que, qu'est-ce que c'est la question? Si je reprenais la question du son, qu'est-ce que ça va dire le son? Okay, so qu'est-ce que ça va dire le son? Translated into English, technically translates into meaning. So that Deleuze is literally saying, what is it that gives meaning to a proposition or a phrase? So keep in mind, as Kleist will be reading in English, when he says the word meaning, that's a translation from the original French son, which I would translate more personally is sense. Sense for me is what gives a sense, a better translation. However, in French is kind of a much richer word. So just keep in mind when Heinrich is saying meaning, also keep in mind that means sense, and sense is kind of a little bit broader than meaning. However, on a superficial level, meaning is a perfect translation. So we have the original text up here on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, we will now let Heinrich do his work. Please, Heinrich, let's go.
I will say, what is the question? If I took up the question of meaning, what does it mean? The meaning of a proposal? To find the meaning of a proposal, in my opinion, we must first bring it back to a concept, or we must designate the concept on which it depends, and then we must discover two things, to which effects this concept is linked. And what does this concept make me perceive? Implied, that I did not perceive before in this way. In other words, any concept is inseparable from an effect and a percept, or several. I mean, what you're entitled to ask philosophy, if philosophy interests you, is that when you offered, or what you're entitled to ask science as well, is to give yourself, to inspire new effects, because in any case it will do it, even if you do not know it, then it is better to know it and to make you perceive new things, to inspire you new effects. There, I would like to take formulas very frequent in some philosophers. It is increase, finally, it is increase your power to exist. I use there, as a term that would be as common to Nietzsche and Spinoza, modify your power to exist.
Okay, so to anyone reasonably familiar with Deleuze, yes, we should notice that this is very Nietzschean and very Spinozian, in the sense that a concept modifies your power to exist. So existence is a question of puissance, of power, and you can increase the power of existing, according to Deleuze, through new affects. Let's say new feelings. Affects does not literally mean feelings, but that's okay. And new percepts, and percepts are new ways of perceiving. And therefore, according to Spinoza and Nietzsche as well, the more affects you're capable of receiving and giving, and the more percepts you're capable of receiving, and therefore you're capable of perceiving much more, the greater your power of existing is. Compare a frog and a human being and a frog from the get-go. Certainly a frog might have some powers of perception and affects that human beings are not capable of, but we can say, I don't want to be mean to frogs, but a human being compared to a frog from birth has a much richer, more developed level of affects, affections and percepts and perceptions. However, human beings at the same time absolutely do not have the same power to exist, meaning that someone who can is capable of affecting and being affected on a higher level and having more capability to perceive further, therefore is a much greater has a much greater power of existence compared to other human beings. So this is the beauty of Spinoza. All human beings, hate to say it, are not, equally powerful. And if you're physically strong and you can kill and beat up other people, that does not make you, that's not puissance, that's a pouvoir, that's a reactionary force, that's a negative affect. A positive affect is something which truly makes you stronger, and that comes about through your capacity to affect and be affected, to perceive, and learn, always learn and grow with new percepts and capabilities of affection. And that's Nietzsche as well. And for Deleuze, this comes through the concept. So the first part, I think, is pretty straightforward. What if I will say, what is the question? If I took up the question of meaning, what does something mean? The meaning of a proposal. To find the meaning of a proposal, in my opinion, we must first bring it back to a concept. The door is white. Okay, if we don't have concepts, it's, what is what? No, quite obvious. Concepts give son, sense, and meaning to our propositions, what we enunciate. Or we must designate the concept on which it depends, And then we must discover two things to which affects this concept is linked. So therefore, we have concepts, and let's say in a really banal, simplified manner, I said the door is white. Let's say there are two concepts, door and white, the concept of color. And we have to ask ourselves, what do those concepts make me perceive, implying that I did not perceive this way before. So the door is multi-dimensional. I have a new concept. It's multi-dimensional, and maybe I will perceive that in a different way. This red phone booth is multi-dimensional. Doctor Who, time machine, not just a simple, this phone booth is red, this phone booth is multi-dimensional. So you're always referring back to concepts, and concepts change your capacity to perceive and affect and being effective. And I think that should be pretty straightforward for everyone. So in other words, any concept is inseparable from an affect and a percept, or several. I mean, what you're entitled to ask philosophy, if philosophy interests you, is that when you're offered, or what you're entitled to ask science as well, is to give yourself, to inspire new effects. Once again, give yourself. This is up to you. You have to enter into a becoming with the concept, and a becoming with its affects and percepts, and that's how you understand the concept. Because in any case, it will do it even if you do not know it. Then it is better to know it and make you perceive new things, to inspire your new affects. There, I would like to take formulas. Formulas are very frequent to some philosophers. So, and we come back to the capacity to increase your power to exist. And keep in mind, Spinoza kind of completely overcomes Aristotle's concept of concepts, in the sense that Spinoza tends to define things or beings not on their essence, their transcendent essence, but on their power, on their power of existence, on their affects and on their percepts. So the famous examples are certain in the animal world. I don't remember specifically, but there are certain horses which behave, which are under the Aristotelian system. You know, a concept is a horse. What is an animal? A man is a rational animal. What is a horse? A horse is a specific animal created in this way. But Spinoza says, no, that whole system doesn't work, because all living beings do not have the same the power of existing. And therefore, he would say, I think it was more cattle than horses. I have to dig that up. But, you know, Spinoza would say there are certain horses which, you know, don't belong to the category of horses, even though conceptually for centuries they do, because they have different powers. And the same applies to a man. For Spinoza, there's not this umbrella concept like which all men are equal and they all have. No. All men, women, preferred gender pronoun, etc., all have different powers of existing, and we're just not on the. It's continually in a state of flux. No, it goes up and goes down. We become strong, we become weak. But if we continue to enter into relationships, relations, or becoming with concepts, however, as our curve might go up and down, over time, we are still always on rising up and becoming, giving ourselves more power of existence. And I didn't, this is one thing, I didn't add this for Heinrich. This is just a part of the lecture where Deleuze says, si bien que j'arriverai presque à une définition très, très bizarre, d'apparence très bizarre de concept, meaning so well, I will arrive to the point where I can give a very, very bizarre definition or a very bizarre description of the appearance of a concept. Then in the lecture, he kind of, it's interesting, but we don't want to go on too long. He kind of talks about being a teacher and the problems involved, because apparently in this course in 1983, there were so many people visiting that Deleuze kind of went into panic and said, I'm not an actor or a clown, and I only want 50 students maximum. And I think there were hundreds and hundreds of students, coming in, and I've got the link on an article. If you have your time, you should read it because it's interesting to understand a little bit about Gilles Deleuze. But I believe, let's look at one more thing, the second to last thing concerning the concept, and we'll jump into time. And let's see if I can load up our second presentation from our dear friend Heinrich von Kleist.
I will say, what is the question? If I took up the question of...
Whoa. Okay, chill. Thank you, Heinrich. We're all bursting at the seams to get going, so I won't hold up on this. And let's see, I will say what the question is. Yes, we're coordinated. A slide on the left, should correspond to our bro Heinrich von Kleist on the right. So let's go.
I will say, what is the question? If I took up the question of meaning, what does it mean? The meaning of a proposal. To find the meaning of a proposal, in my opinion, we must first bring it back to a concept, or we must designate the concept on which it depends, and then we must discover two things to which affect this concept is linked. And what does this concept make me perceive? Implied that I did not perceive before in this way. In other words, any concept is inseparable from an affect and a percept, or several. I mean, what you're entitled to ask philosophy, if philosophy interests you, is that when you're offered, or what you're entitled to ask science as well, is to give yourself, to inspire new affects.
Shit. What in the fuck? I gotta fix that up.
I will say, what is the question? If I took up the question of meaning, what does it mean? The meaning of a proposal? To find the meaning of a proposal, in my opinion, we must first bring it back to a concept, or we must designate the concept on which it depends, and then we must discover two things, to which effects this concept is linked. And what does this concept make me perceive? Implied that I did not perceive before in this way. In other words, any concept is inseparable from an affect and a percept, or several. I mean, what you're entitled to ask philosophy, if philosophy interests you, is that when you're offered, or what you're entitled to ask science as well, is to give yourself, to inspire new effects, because in any case it will do it, even if you do not know it, then it is better to know it and to make it.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next part on the concept, and we will let Heinrich take things over.
I come back to this story, The concepts I say, as long as you have not found which affections are related to them, which effects are related to them, in what and in what ways they affect you, and in what they make you perceive. Those are the two problems. In other words, to put it simply, your way of feeling has to be changed. Even on tiny points, you have to see things that, but you see in the sense of perception, things that, before, you don't see. I mean, in that sense, any concept is what? Pulmonary and visionary. Finally, I will find a better word. that is, it is inseparable from affects and percepts. And the English, they saw it very well. James, for example, Henry's brother, William James, proposed a philosophy that would really be built on percepts, and he said, no concept without percept. Moreover, he said that he was not even interested. What he needed were new percepts, new ways of perceiving. Now, I believe that there is rather a trinity concept/affect/percept that is fundamental, but a concept is an intelligibility that takes its meaning only by the affects to which it is linked as a concept and the percepts, the new percepts that it gives us.
Excellent. Thank you, Heinrich. Excellent. And I think once again, this should be pretty clear for the Gilles Deleuze followers, but it's really, really worth. It always has to be kept in mind. Deleuze is defined. We've looked at kind of very quickly and loosely the construction of a concept, and the fact that for Deleuze, a concept is kind of a living thing, and the concept itself is always in a state of becoming, and also you as an being enter into a state of becoming with the concept itself, which is in a state of becoming. You are also in a state of becoming, and you are exchanging affects and percepts over throughout time. So right here, so I'm trying to say, yes, I came back to this story, the concept, I say, as long as you have not found which affections are related to them, which affects are related to them, in what ways they affect you, and in what they make you perceive. Those are the two problems. In other words, to put it simply, your way of feeling has to be changed. Even on tiny points, you have to see things that, but you see in the sense of perception, things that before you don't perceive. So if Cartesio or René Descartes creates the concept of I think, therefore I am, obviously that concept heavily affected both through percepts and affects a great number of people, and had a role, a certain role in changing the course of history, because that was kind of the final death bell, or the death knell of the absolute authority of the Christian church in terms of thought and philosophy and science. The writing was on the wall, and René Descartes invented a concept which apparently affected society in a very, very very, very important way, in which he stated, we are private thinkers. We do not accept what the public thinkers, e.g. the church, tell us, and we have to deduce on our own as private individual thinkers. We have to deduce, in Descartes' case, the truth on our own. So the power of concepts and the affects and the percepts that it carries with it are can be of extreme great importance, especially on a historical scale, but even on just a very simple day-to-day scale, and in making yourself okay, let's not go into cliches, let's not say a better person, but increase your power to exist more, to perceive more, of the world. So I mean, in that sense, any concept is what? Pulmonary and visionary. And I love this this definition right here. Let's go on. Finally, I will find a better word. That is, it is inseparable from affects and percepts. So Deleuze is using pulmonary as, and this is the same in the original French, pulmonaire et visionnaire. So hang on, let's highlight that. Pulmonaire et visionnaire. On fait, je trouverai un mot meilleur. Okay, so pulmonary, affect, pulmon, lungs, body. So affects are things that have to do with your body as a physical body, as a body in the sensible world, in the sensory world, in the empirical world. So they can be feelings, but that for me, that's always kind of a weak translation. Affects. One of the best examples of affects from Deleuze was when the Spanish conquistadores went to South America, and they brought with them the virus of the la grippe, the flu. And they wiped out, God knows, however poor, innocent, local natives in South America, because that's an affect, that is a corporeal thing that has to do with bodies. So the Europeans and the Spanish had this affect which they could give, the flu. You can transmit it to other people, and you can also catch the flu. However, the Native Americans, that is an affect which they absolutely did not possess, and nor were capable of possessing, but obviously not their fault. They were just, hanging out in their home countries, and throughout their history, they never developed, such this kind of disease. So when the Spanish came over, they unwittingly unleashed this bodily affect of the flu on the native people, and unwittingly, caused the death of, I believe, millions and millions of natives. So when people kind of, even Deleuze himself kind of talks, on one hand, an affect is a feeling, but it always is eradicated in the corporeal, the body. It's not like, I feel sad, that's an affect. Yes, that is an affect, because sadness is an affect that does affect your body as well. But I think for affect, until you really figure it out on your own, and like Deleuze says, it's up to you to decide. I would think of an aspect as a pulmonary thing, meaning as something, or like a kidney thing, or whatever, something which has to do with your body and its relations and affects that it exchanges with external surrounding bodies. And also, at the time, we can also say feelings, but it has to be feelings, which is always brought back to a physical state. And then he says pulmonary and visionary, and obviously visionary has to do with percepts. So, and the English, they saw it very well. James, for example, Henry's brother, William James, proposed a philosophy that would really be built on percepts, and he said no concept without percept. Moreover, he said the concepts, he said that he was not even interested. What he needed were new percepts, new ways of perceiving. Now, I believe that there is rather a trinity of concept, affect, and percept. That is fundamental. But a concept is an intelligibility that takes its meaning only by the affects to which it is linked as a concept and the percepts, the new percepts that it gives us. So like Deleuze said a little bit before in this seance, the concept without all of its affects and percepts is 0, 0, 0, and 0. It's just a dead body, an intelligible thing, yes, but it in itself, if it is not in a becoming, if it is not creating new affects and percepts for people, beings in relation with it, a concept on its own is worth essentially 0. Okay, so the important point here is that a concept is never inseparable from affects and percepts, and therefore a concept, according to Gilles Deleuze and Pierre-Félix Guattari, is both composed of affects and percepts and is a living entity, which is always in a state of becoming throughout time, and therefore the concept affects the individual, the person, or people who enter into a becoming with the concept and the percept as well. So I'm just going to get into this very quickly to hammer a little bit more on the idea of an affect, which is always in a lot of reading on Deleuze scholars has always been kind of unclear, because they say it's like a feeling, no, it's an emotion, but no, quite the contrary. The affect is something absolutely, like Deleuze said, pulmonary, physical, which affects your body in itself, and therefore the example of the Spanish and the conquest of South America, and how the flu was an enormous affect. It was molecular, submolecular, which murdered millions of South American people. So I am going to just read, because I've read a lot of articles on Deleuze and viruses and Deleuze and COVID, which is an interesting case, but I really didn't find anything to be really interesting. So I'm just going to go back, and we're going to invite Heinrich to read us 2 paragraphs from Mille Plateaux by Deleuze and Guattari concerning viruses as affects, and potentially also percepts. But the important thing is as we said before, that the concept always involves affects and percepts. So let's let Heinrich start. Let me shut my volume down.
Evolution of two beings who have absolutely nothing to do with each other. More generally, evolution patterns may shift away from the old model of tree and offspring. Under certain conditions, a virus can connect to germ cells and transmit itself as a cell gene of a complex species. Moreover, it could leak, pass into the cells of another species, not without genetic information came from the first host. So the current research of Benveniste and Todaro on a type C virus, in its double connection with the baboon DNA and the DNA of certain species of domestic cats. The evolution patterns would no longer be based only on tree-bearing models, ranging from at least differentiated to more differentiated, but following a rhizome operating immediately in heterogeneity and jumping from one already differentiated line to another.
Okay, and so this is the definition of a virus according to Deleuze and Guattari and Mille Plateaux, and the important point here is that what they are kind of challenging the Darwinian model of evolution, which is arborescent, in which you just have a straight tree with lineages, and then you have offspring, and then, You have outside factors, and therefore you evolve. But in the Darwinian sense, it's only man in itself or any other species evolving according to its own genetics, essentially. So if we go here, evolutionary patterns may shift away from the old model of tree and offspring. Under certain conditions, a virus can connect to germ cells and transmit itself as a cell gene of a complex series. Moreover, it could leak, pass into the cells of another species, not without genetic information which came from the first host. So the current research of Benaviste and Todaro on a type C virus in its double connection with the baboon and the DNA of certain species of domestic cats. So Benaviste and Todaro researched, amongst many other things, viruses exchanged between baboons, monkeys, and cats. And a virus has to be understood as a kind of becoming on a physical level in the empirical world. And virus is a question of affecting someone else and changing your capacity to be affected. So apparently baboons in this study once had created a virus which cats caught, and in that virus DNA was exchanged between the cats and the baboons, and as Deleuze and Guattari say, this is a double movement because that same virus would go back, it would create a rhizome within the cat, meaning it would change its DNA structure and alter it literally physically, and that if the cats were still in relation with the baboons, that would go back to the baboons, and the baboons, would also have a kind of, they would enter into a becoming, and they would also be affected from cats as they were affected by the virus. So it's a double movement. It's a becoming between two species, cats and baboons. Baboons have a certain sickness that cats aren't used to, and then the cats catch the virus, and then their bodies change, especially at the genetic level. But that goes back to the baboons, and the baboons change on genetic level. So very simply, Deleuze and Guattari are saying is that evolution is not just what Darwin says. It's not just an arborescent tree model where everyone goes down and that's my grandma, that's my grandpa. They're saying on a molecular and a submolecular level, there are all these becomings and sicknesses between different species, living species, that heavily affect not only us or humans or all the species, but affect the whole chain of evolution. So you can't just say it's man evolving, through time without any external reference. No, man has historically been infected by virus since the beginning. 1900 Spanish flu. Man was affected by that. His DNA was altered by that. The plague, and you just go back and back over history, there have been millions of viruses. So right here, that is an affect, and man's evolution is, as Darwin said, does tend to operate in an arboreal manner, like a tree, which ramifies itself, but at the same time, there are important variations which come through sickness, illnesses, and viruses. So obviously, things are very Spinozian at this point. That we are always in relations with our surroundings, with other animals, with plants, with trees, with flowers. and disease and virus is the principal means of becoming between other living beings in terms of affects, bodily affects, things that actually change your body, even if we don't recognize them. And then after, we'll just take a quick look into COVID. And COVID is a little bit more complicated, but you're still being affected by this virus. And then you're also, unfortunately, getting affected by the vaccines, because apparently the vaccines for COVID were full, both Moderna and Pfizer were full of bacterial DNA. So on one hand, if you caught COVID, which may have origins with bats, it may have not, it may have been done in a laboratory, we don't know, it's all a mess. But if indeed it was something that came from bats, and even if it was modified in a laboratory, that's kind of becoming bat COVID on a molecular level, on a submolecular level. However, at the same time, the vaccines we took for very stupid reasons, and we'll look into that, were full of not RNA, but DNA coming from essentially bacteria, which was used to rush the production of the anti-COVID vaccination. So the point is, we're being shot through with other DNA all the time, and that is not a new thing. That's occurred through all of history, and therefore we have this rhizomatic issue of viruses putting us into becoming with other beings, with other DNA, and our point here is that that's an affect that changes your body. If you took the vaccine, we don't know today what the results will be. It might be in 3 centuries, but we are not just simply, human beings evolving through time. We are always in becomings with all kinds of other beings on the planet, and therefore evolution could be considered equally as rhizomatic as being arborescent. So we're going to just finish up right now with Heinrich, who's going to read us the second paragraph from Mille Plateaux by Deleuze and Guattari on viruses, and we'll move on.
Here again, evolution a-paralel baboon and cat, where one is obviously not the model of the other, nor the other the copy of. One, a becoming baboon in the cat would not mean that the cat make the baboon. We make rhizome with our viruses, or rather our viruses make us do rhizome with other animals. As Jacob says, transfers of genetic material by virus or other processes, the merging of cells from different species, have results similar to those of abominable loves dear to antiquity and the Middle Ages. Transversal communications between differentiated lines blur the trees. Genealogical. Always look for the molecular, or even the submolecular part with which we make alliance. We evolve and we die from our polymorphic and rhizomatic influenza, more than from our diseases of descent or which have themselves their descendants. The rhizome is an antigenealogy.
Excellent, Heinrich. Thank you very much. So, I think this should all be pretty clear by now. The rhizome is an anti-genealogy, and a virus, not on its own, but when it enters into a living corporeal being, creates a rhizome. So, Deleuze Modeste is saying there's an a-parallel evolution between a baboon and a cat. Obviously, a cat is a cat genetically, a baboon is a baboon genetically. So they have different arborescent evolutionary models. They're going to evolve according to what they are. And obviously, one is not the model of the other or a copy of one. So becoming baboon in the cat would not mean that the cat make the baboons. So it's just simple. They're two different entities with their own evolutionary line. However, when there is a virus between a baboon and a cat, we make rhizome with our viruses, or rather our viruses make us to rhizome with other animals. As Jacob says, transfers of genetic material by virus or other processes, the merging of cells from different species, have results similar to those of abominable loves dear to antiquity in the Middle Ages. So right after, we're going to take a quick look into that. The first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is bestiality, and I believe that's a part of it, but it's a little bit deeper than that. Always... now hang on. Transversal communications between differentiated line blurs the trees. So the trees are the arborescent trees, which are guaranteeing, descendants, my son, my son, my son, my son, my son, my son. But viruses are blurring all of that. Let's put it in a really basic way. Like, I'm a direct descendant of my let's pretend we're royalty. I'm the king of England. I'm a direct descendant of my great grandfather, and therefore I have all the qualities of my great grandfather. No, your great grandfather might have caught a virus, a flu. Your great grandfather, your grandfather might have caught another virus or another sickness and survived, and then your father may have caught other viruses, and therefore you are not, you cannot claim that genetically you are the same as your great-great-grandfather. You have been mutated through this constant flux of illness and viruses, which have existed from the beginning of time, and that is simply, viruses are affects. They are becomings that alter you physically. And obviously, also, affects are not without percepts. So your percepts obviously come together with the affects, and you are just, and that's what Deleuze Guattari call anti-genealogy, genealogical, everything straight line, everything normal. Humans, descendants, were just evolving and becoming perfect. No, you are affected by shit all over the place every day and generation to generation. It's the submolecular or molecular affects that you get with other animals, essentially, according to Deleuze and Guattari, through flus, illnesses, and viruses. The Black Plague, I believe, came from the presence of rats. So very Spinozian. Once again, we are all in a web of existence and relations together, us and the animals and the trees and whatever. And we are always in a state of becoming, and therefore exchanging information. In the case of viruses, an affect is something which actually affects us on the genetic level. So we evolve and we die from our polymorphic and rhizomatic influence, more than from our diseases of descent, or which have themselves in their descendants. The rhizome is anti-genealogy. Once again, pretty simple. My family have always been susceptible to, what's it called? I can't even remember. Alzheimer's disease and heart attacks. But that is arborescent. That means like, oh, my grandfather died of a heart attack and he had Alzheimer's. My father, had Alzheimer's, died of a heart attack. But what Deleuze and Guattari are saying here is that we die more from polymorphic and rhizomatic influence more than from our diseases of descent. So the further we go forward in becoming, we evolve, but we evolve according to an arborescent Darwinian evolution. However, at the same time, the further we go through time, the further we evolve through time, the more becomings, the more viruses we take on with other animals or the external world, the less probable is, and this should be very obvious, that, you will just have exactly the same problems that your father, mother, grandmother, grandfather had, because you're going to have a whole new set of problems due to all of the other viruses that you have taken on and that have physically modified your body. So it should be all clear. And let's just take a quick look. I find this curious. The abominable loves dear to antiquity and the Middle Ages. So that sounds pretty spicy. Let's take a quick look into that. Okay, so just to close up this issue on viruses, which obviously came from looking into affects, which together with percepts are always a fundamental part of a concept which always affects us and allows us to affect other beings, other people, other beings, and our percepts. It increases our power of perception and therefore increases our power of existence. I'm just going to add very quickly an article I came across today concerning COVID, which I think demonstrates the validity of Plateau and Deleuze and Guattari's propositions concerning viruses and their role in evolution. So I came across this today and was quite curious, and I repeat again that this whole COVID issue came along in a time when it's very difficult to understand or to have really concrete information, because we live in times where everyone has an opinion and there's really no clarity in the issue. But I think the concept itself of viruses from Deleuze and Guattari is still very applicable to the COVID virus. So a new preprint study for peer review finds billions of residual DNA fragments in the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine vials, meaning essentially that the vaccines we took or we did not take essentially have fragments, billions of residual DNA fragments. So the lead author of the study, molecular virologist David Spiker, it depends, who has a doctorate in virology, told the Epoch Times that their study is the largest study on residual DNA in COVID-19 vaccines to date. In our study, we measured DNA copies of spike, origin of replication, and SV40 enhancer genes, he told the Epoch Times. The loads of SV40 enhancer promoter, ORI, and virus spike in Pfizer are up to 187 billion copies per dose. The spike he refers to is the DNA sequence of the SARS SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, which can be transcribed to spike mRNA to be used in COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, to be translated to spike protein. The other two DNAs, SV40 enhancer genes and ORI, help facilitate the replication of spike DNA. However, the final mRNA vaccine should only include RNA and not residual DNA instructions for spike production. And this is where things get a little bit messy. So, as we've stated, Deleuze and Guattari talked about this double movement. On one hand, you have the virus itself, which affects us. On the other hand, you would theoretically have the virus that affects the origin of the virus, which we believe to be in the case of COVID, bats, may or not be true. It may or not be a laboratory created weapon of destruction. We don't really know, but the one thing we do know is that a vaccine should not contain DNA, because DNA is obviously, as with a virus, that is something that modifies our bodies. It affects us, but it also modifies the evolution of mankind in itself. So let's just take a quick look into RNA. So, a vaccine can contain RNA, but should never contain DNA. So RNA is a ribonucleic acid, a polymeric molecule that is essential for most biological functions, either by performing the function itself, non-coding RNA, or by forming a template for the production of proteins, which is called messenger RNA. RNA and deoxyribonucleic acid, sorry for my pronunciation, are nucleic acids. They are nucleic acids. They constitute one of the four major macromolecules essential for all known forms of life. RNA is assembled as a chain of nucleotides. Cellular organisms use messenger RNA, mRNA, that relates directly to COVID, to convey genetic information using nitrogenous bases of guanine, uracil, adenine, and cytosine, denoted by the letters G, U, A, and C, that direct synthesis of specific proteins. Many viruses encode their genetic information using a RNA genome. So going on quickly, the chemical structure of RNA is very similar to that of DNA, but differs in three primary ways. Unlike double-stranded DNA, RNA is usually a single-stranded molecule in many of its biological roles and consists of much shorter chains of nucleotides. However, double-stranded RNA, dsRNA, can form, and moreover, a single RNA molecule, which can, by complementary base pairing, form infrastrand double helixes, as in tRNA. So I repeat, we are not biologists here, and we don't want to get too much into that, but let's just say that the vaccines offered were one was the mRNA vaccine, the other was the Pfizer vaccine. However, and things get a little bit strange, but I honestly don't think when we go into this it's going to be too strange. But studies now show that these vaccines contained massive amounts, meaning billions, of residual DNA. And we do know that in a vaccine, you do not want to put DNA into it. So it would appear, according to this molecular biologist, that according to tests, empirical tests on thousands of vaccines, they discovered billions of residual DNA. As we say, however, the final mRNA vaccine should only include RNA and not residual DNA instructions for spike production. So the difference between mRNA and DNA is a question for biologists. However, DNA, obviously, we know that is the double helix genetic structure. And RNA, however, normally is contains genetic information, but is normally a single helix, and therefore it does not have the same role as DNA, unless in certain laboratory conditions it can be pushed to be tMRA, in which it can have a double helix structure, but at the same time it is not the same of RNA. RNA is essentially an agent that produces proteins, and therefore an agent of protection against incoming outside viruses. The researchers sequenced the gene material in 27 mRNA vaccine vials from 12 different lots. 19 vials were from Moderna, and 8 were from Pfizer. Further work is needed to investigate if anything in these vaccines is actually integrating into the human genome and what effect that may have. So, once again, as Deleuze and Guattari said, we have this double movement. Well, it's actually a trinity. It's 3 movements. You have the virus itself, which affects you. Once you get that virus, theoretically, you would affect the agent of the virus, who in the case of COVID could potentially be bats. However, we live in contemporary times in 2023, and this may be a virus generated in a laboratory for God knows what ever a horrific reason. And as we don't want to spend too much time on this, our essential point is just to point out, essentially, regarding this part of our chapter, is that affects are these are affects. Affects are actual physical, molecular. What did we say? They are even, on a submolecular level. These are always things which are always occurring all day long. If you get sick, if you get the flu, and that's why evolution, Darwinian evolution, did not take into account these becomings we have. Essentially, that's what a virus is with other species, essentially. So if we just look here, and things get a little bit stranger. So obviously we ask ourselves the question, why would there be DNA in our mRNA vaccines? Because we know that vaccines should never have any DNA in them, because you're injecting something which will genetically modify you, but also your children, and it's going to modify the whole tree system. of evolution, maybe in a small way, like we saw before, maybe in a big way, we don't know. So the mRNA vaccines are made from DNA. Initially, Pfizer reported that it would use a PCR machine to produce the DNA. For the mRNA vaccines, the PCR machine would first make many copies of DNA, and then the same DNA would be sequenced into RNA. So, once again, we're not going to get back into biology, but DNA is the actual double helix genetic spiral that determines from generation to generation the arborescence, the linearity of revolution. And RNA it has a similar structure to DNA. However, it is not in itself DNA. It does not contain the genetic information. It normally has. It does have information, but it's a single spiral. It promotes the synthesis of proteins, and so the point is that RNA is kind of let's say a derivative of DNA, which has its own role, which is not that of actual genetic transfer of information. So the issue here is, however, because this process would not be fast enough to meet demand, so the people who made the vaccines have a PCR machine in which they would put in DNA and somehow translate that into RNA, but apparently this process is very, very slow. So because there was this great urgency to produce a vaccine for the COVID virus, the process of using the PCR machine would have been way too long in order to meet demands. So, and we get right now to the point which I find a little bit troublesome, but maybe not. Pfizer announced they would use bacteria to produce the spike DNA instead. The DNA produced from the bacteria would then be harvested and sequenced to RNA in a machine. So once again, they did not have time to get this vaccine out without direct DNA being involved. Moderna's manufacturing reports submitted to the European Medicine Agency also showed that the company used plasmid DNA to produce the vaccines. A plasmid is a strand of circular DNA common to bacteria and certain parasites. Plasmids are circular, while human DNA is linear. Using bacteria to produce genes and proteins is a standard biotechnological process employed in the productions of pharmaceuticals. To have the bacteria replicate spike protein DNA, scientists first have to introduce spike protein DNA into the bacteria. As the bacteria multiplies, so do the spike protein DNA they carry. However, the spike DNA cannot be introduced alone. Other sequences, such as the ORI, which signals for DNA replication, the SV40 enhancer gene, which encourages more DNA replication, and an antibiotic resistance gene, which helps scientists identify the bacteria that have taken up the gene, would all be introduced together in a circular bacterial DNA. So essentially, they took a shortcut and they introduced DNA from bacteria, which is not a double helix like it is for more evolved species. However, bacteria do have DNA sequences, but they are circular. And apparently, by introducing this into the vaccine, it was much quicker, and therefore they could get the vaccine out on time, both to save lives and both to obviously make unholy sums of money. It should be noted that the SV40 enhancer gene is a genetic sequence from the polyomavirus simian virus 40, SV40, a DNA virus known to cause cancer in laboratory animals. So that is a DNA sequence that comes from bacteria, which is circular, not helical. But if an animal comes, or I believe human beings come into contact and therefore are becoming with this circular virus, it can be known to be very dangerous and cause cancer. The gene is not the SF40 virus itself. Once the mRNA and DNA are harvested from the bacteria, the DNA is then supposed to be removed. However, if it wasn't cleared efficiently, as the billions of copies of spike, ORI, and SV40 enhancer DNA detected in the Pfizer trial suggest, several millions of copies of ORI and spike DNA were also found in the Moderna vials, but the SV40 enhancer gene was not detected. So we're going to leave off here because our original goal was time, and then we got into concepts, and then also affects and percepts, and that will be very, very, very important in understanding the unhinging of time, which Immanuel Kant sets off with his determination that reason in itself creates illusions, and those illusions do not have to be dispelled. Those illusions have to be maintained, and we just got quickly into affects, and I wanted to explain that affects are actual molecular, submolecular things which we experience all day long. We are always under the constant affects, and we are always constantly affecting other beings, other persons, etc., etc. So we don't want to get too much in. It was just to explain. To give the example of South America and the flu, and COVID is another obvious example of an affect which affects us. And in the case of COVID, honestly, we really don't know. It would appear from this article that in order to get that virus out on time, shortcuts were taken. Bacteria were introduced, and bacteria do have DNA, circular DNA, not helical DNA, and therefore, at least according to this study, however valid it may be, the vaccine, if anyone took the vaccine, I have taken it a number of times because I had to travel. That would mean that I have billions and billions of circular DNA, which means essentially that they didn't have time to efficiently remove the DNA from the RNA. So I have both RNA and DNA inside me, which comes from bacteria and plasmoids. So thanks Pfizer, or I don't even know what I took. Thanks Moderna, Pfizer, good job. So I'm literally filled with billions of ORI, SV40, and actual DNA. So like we can say it's a good thing, that's a bad thing. It's everything today is polemical, but the real point is that since the beginning of time and man's existence, he's always been exposed to these viruses, and therefore the Spanish flu and just go back 100 years, the plague. I mean, even on a submolecular level, we're always taking on viruses. We get sick, we have the flu. So, what actually happens is that when we get that, our genetics are essentially modified, and that is an affect. Our body is literally being changed. But we have a short lifespan, so that goes on through evolution from generation to generation. And according to Deleuze and Guattari, these affects we get from viruses, and nowadays we also get affects from the vaccines, who are pumping us up with DNA, which we don't have absolutely no clue what it's about or where it comes from, no idea. But we are constantly being affected in a physical sense. So Deleuze is saying a concept, this is the basic point, a concept affects us physically, it affects our bodies. It's a concept. It's not a virus, but it's a concept affects us physically. It changes us physically, and at the same time, it affects us with percepts, meaning it changes our perception, our power to perceive, etc., etc. So let's sign off with this stuff on COVID and keep going on. So just out of curiosity, we're going to get into very quickly, superficially, this issue of abominable participants, which Deleuze says in early Christianity and the medieval ages were already beyond viruses contributing to variations of evolution due to essentially rhizomatic entities becoming essentially. So abominable participations, I'm going to read directly here, we'll go very quick. Jacob compared exceptional processes like symbiosis to the abominable couplings dear to antiquity and the Middle Ages. Okay, so as Deleuze stated that in the footnotes, that comes directly from our writer Jacob. He says that were such encounters able, even exceptionally, to have consequences, this is 1993, this is enough to provide an opportunity for very profound changes. In other words, symbiosis could be a potent source of variation for natural selection Darwin, to work on, if only symbiosis was not rare to the point of being almost a fable. So Deleuze and Guattari are talking about molecular and the submolecular fable. It's obvious that if I get COVID, I'm not going to become a bat. It's obvious that if I caught the bubonic plague, I'm not going to become a rat. So obviously, this happens on very, very molecular and submolecular on very small levels. However, over time, that can become an important factor. In other words, symbiosis could be a potent source of variation for natural selection to work on, if only symbiosis was not rare to the point of being almost a fable. I just read that as Jacob thought it was. Margulis recovers the same image and predictably goes much further. Attraction, merger, fusion, incorporation, cohabitation, recombination, both permanent and cyclical, and other forbidden couplings are the main source of Darwin's missing variations. So once again, I think we all get the point. Darwin's evolution was purely arborescent, and every species just follows its own line, but due to viruses, which are affects, that is not the case. So, but we still want to get spicy here, honestly, and understand what these forbidden couplings actually are. So let's see. I don't think we're going to get all the way here because we're all, good scholars. We have to be good boys, etc. But let's go on. Scholars remain uncertain as to exactly what religious authorities condemned with the language of unnatural nuptials. So, okay, the church condemned an unnatural nuptial. So, what is an unnatural nuptial? An early variation on the theme appears in Leviticus. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination. Okay, nothing clear there. Paul promoted the terminology to connote otherwise unnameable sexual offenses. So, okay, God wanted to smite the idolatrous pagans whose irrepressible polytheism worshipped the creature more than the creator. For this cause, God gave them up into vile affections. Oh, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature, and likewise also the man, leaving the natural use of the woman. So also in medieval times, God affected people, and that's kind of the point. Affections are corporeal, pulmonary, as Deleuze said. They have to do with our bodies on a purely physical level. So the apostolic constitutions, 3rd century AD, refer to unlawful mixtures, contrary to nature, wicked and impious. So Augustine explained the unnatural use of an organ as for which it was not given by God. We can all guess what that organ is, but which is imposed upon it by man's intention. So God gave man, we're just talking about man, it's the same for women. God gave you an organ, and we know what the organ is, I hope. But man is using that organ beyond God's intentions, which is obviously to create children. Then he said that for man to use a female organ in a way that is against nature was abominable in a prostitute, but more abominable in a wife. By the 12th century, what is done against nature had become an all-purpose euphemism for forbidden sexual activity. Such vagueness was not without its uses, but it made the terminology unsuited for the handbooks of penance, which, written to regulate the hearing of confession, had to be precise and discerning. So let's just do one more paragraph and we'll close up this subject right here. This is just out of curiosity, these abominable acts and affects, which are principally sexual, which principally occurred in early Christianity and also the Middle Ages, appear to be, according to the church, acts of the use of sexual organs, not for procreation, but perhaps for pleasure. But I think there's also an underlying theme that these organs, have been used in all kinds of ways and forms, etc., etc. Deleuze and Guattari seem to enjoy subverting the religious trope, describing symbiotic linkages across scales and kinds as unnatural nuptials, unnatural couplings, and abominable participants. They say the plane of composition, the plane of nature, is precisely for participations of this kind, and continually makes and unmakes their assemblages, employing every artifice. It's like every artifice. Oh my God, that's great.